Welcome to everyone, and some familiar faces. I see Jill sort of vanishing into the distance there. There you are. and also a couple of new faces or new names. Everyone is most welcome. And so we're particularly happy that, Frances, that you could be with us, especially for later on for the discussion. It's kind of toevallig, you know, that Hildegard of Bingen is coming into focus in so many ways. Perhaps you saw on Spiraza as well. There's been quite a lot of talk about Hildegard, so we're delighted. And of course, EJ, many thanks for organizing it, for coordinating it and keeping us all on track. And also for your willingness to put this video up. And thanks so much, Frances, for this information and the video. So we look forward to that. We'll start with the video. It is a little bit long, but if anyone needs to get up and get their coffee, no problem. And then we'll have the discussion with Frances and others. So thank you. So thanks, EJ. We'll go ahead.
Well, I hope everybody's feeling a little bit of that Hildegardian light that we've been experiencing all week, and some of that fiery light that Colleen just brought to us and shared with us. And I'd like to bring Matthew Fox to speak with us now, and I am so thankful that he has been part of my life. I think it's been 8 years since I first heard him speak live. I was videotaping him here in Boulder talking about Via Creativia. He spoke about Hildegard for probably most of that time. And from that, he's been a constant influence and a support in all of my creative projects, including in the new one that we're working on about Albert Einstein. We filmed him last April when we were visiting. So Matthew, I think you're muted at the moment. So I'll just unmute you or ask you to unmute yourself. All right. So welcome to join us on this last day. I think you have a good sense of where we're at. And maybe the first question I would just ask you is, where does the word fiery light appear in Hildegard's work? And where did you first encounter it?
Well, first, let me just say thank you to you, Michael, for your wonderful and trailblazing work all these years on Hildegard and other unruly mystics. And I want to wish happy feast day to all of these fellow travelers of yours. I was wondering if you have a lot of blisters, 12 days on the road, but I guess this is a new version of pilgrimage, and for that imagination, I praise you also. But it's an honor to be with these other lovers and scholars of Hildegard, and I'm very moved by everything that's transpired this morning. And it's really fun to see this priest talk about the cookies, Hildegard cookies and recipes and all that. And then there's this other priest who was a theology professor and so forth to say that he got into artist meditation or painting later in his life, thanks to Hildegard, and this beautiful story from Australia. So anyway, what you've gathered here, Michael, deserves great praise. And it's very much in the spirit of Hildegard, not only because you're talking about her, but because you're part of a new and a more ancient understanding of what learning and education should be about, that it includes pilgrimages, physical ones as well as online ones. It includes art and creativity. I mean, one thing that amazes me about Hildegard is her first book, and I have this beautiful German edition I've had for years, and they did a marvelous job of reproducing and so forth. But just to realize that just the creativity in the art, and of course, this echoes the Book of Kells and the whole Celtic tradition, of course. But to realize that when she wrote her first book, it included an opera, it included dozens of paintings and poetry and science and theology. Where has that gone? Our education has been so utterly slimmed down to knowledge left brain, intellect and rationality alone, that for this reason alone, Hildegard is a prophet and a turner over of tables, because what she represents in terms of the full soul, the quest for wisdom, not just the quest for knowledge. And so what you're doing here is of that ilk. You're bringing in the poets, you're bringing in your own video, you're bringing in the scholars. And I just want to honor that, because that's why the earth is dying. You know, Thomas Berry says that most of the destruction of the planet today is happening at the hands of people with PhDs. So in other words, a great big left brain without wisdom, without heart, without compassion, without creativity is dangerous. It's a power, it can be a power trip. And so Hildegard, and not just her, but the pre-modern consciousness that she represents, sought wisdom and not just knowledge. And this is what's been lost for hundreds of years in the West. And it's part of patriarchy to banish wisdom. Wisdom is feminine, not only in the Bible, Sophia and Chokmah, but around the world. I have a statue over here of Kuan Yin from the East. So what you're doing is in that tradition of wisdom teaching. And so I just want to honor that. That alone moves me, and it's been part of this hour we've already spent together. And I honor that. We can't do wisdom without art. And Hildegard said that. She said there's wisdom in all creativity. Now, the presence of light, well, you know, the very word illuminations, which is her generic term for her paintings, indicates that she talks often about this experience she had of living light. That's just a marvelous archetype. For me, it echoes the archetype of the cosmic Christ, which is about the light, John 1, the light in every being. And today's science tells us that there's light waves, photons in every atom in the universe. So the macrocosm of the universe, and of course, Genesis 1 begins with light. But so does today's scientific story of creation, beginning with the fireball. So that light becomes incarnate, it becomes very personal to us. Now, let me say, I'm in Northern California, and we've been through hell the last 3 weeks at least with these fires and the smoke. We have not seen the sun for over 25 days. One scientist has said that breathing in this air today that's around this area in the west of the United States is equivalent to smoking 25 packs of cigarettes. So everything Hildegard warned us about how creation, God will allow creation to punish humanity, is happening in real time. And this is just the wildfires here. Of course, last summer, Australia went through this. And of course, also in southern United States today, there are these recurring floods and hurricanes and the rest. So her creation-centered mysticism could not be more appropriate for our time. But it's not just about experiencing bliss in the light. It's also about experiencing that fire that she talks about, that we arise from dullness, she says. I just love that teaching. Arise from dullness into vigorous justice. Let me get the words exactly. Here it is. I have it in today's meditation, in my daily meditations. Today is dedicated, of course, to Hildegard's feast day. She says, we shall awaken from our dullness and rise vigorously toward justice. So we have to start rising vigorously toward justice, get out of our denial and make-believe worlds we live in, our bubbles. And this means eco-justice and gender justice. And gender justice isn't real unless we're bringing the feminine understanding of learning, which includes wisdom and art and creativity, into all of our educational systems, all of them. And I mean law schools that produce our one-sided judges. And I mean business and economics, all of it has to be penetrated by the divine feminine and by wisdom. Knowledge is not enough. Knowledge is literally destroying the earth, and time is running out. So I just want to honor that. And so this light, the living light, that also spoke to her. It awakened her, it spoke to her. But really, it speaks to all of us in different ways. Like you talk about your experience at that lake or at DC Bodenberg, that the Spirit speaks to us if we're listening. And sometimes it actually talks language. When you were speaking about this Canadian trip, I was reminded of this amazing photographer from Canada. Oh, now I'm going to forget his name. Miles, is it? But he has an amazing story to tell. And, you know, he was not a religious person as such, but one night, it was a moonlit night, full moon, and he went to the window and he was just awed by it, kind of like you were, in a place of tranquility and peace, in the heart of nature. And then he heard this voice, and it told him to go around the world and photograph the sacred sites of the world. This came to me when you talked, because you were talking about these sacred sites that move us. And then he didn't know what to do. He went to a bookstore, and my book on the cosmic Christ kind of fell out of the bookshelf and hit him in the head. He'd never heard of this. He read it. He said he took that book with him around the world, and he created this beautiful book. I have it in my living room, of the sacred sites of the world. But toward the end of his life, when he couldn't travel and all that, what he did, he created a new book on the pond in his backyard. And he said, the sacred of the world is, you don't have to go to all these sacred sites. I mean, he had all these adventures. Someone stole his photography equipment in China or something like that. I mean, what after? But he said the whole time he felt embraced by this light. He said, what you call the cosmic Christ. This was my experience. So I think that's what Hildegard is talking about. And again, we must deconstruct hagiography. You know, Hildegard is not to be put up on a pedestal. We have to ask that question. Where is it present in our lives? Where is that living light in our lives? Where is that passion for justice and greening in our lives? And there's a real danger of projecting our holiness onto these figures we call saints. That's very corrosive thinking and dangerous, because a real mystic is a prophet also. It's awakening us to what our capacities are about. And we're not going to imitate them. We're going to do it our way. And in our generation, like you're doing it, Michael, with the special gifts of light that we call video and film. And now internet. So anyway, that's a long answer to your question. I'm sorry.
That was great. And I really thank you for the acknowledgement. I definitely appreciate that, because you know, you never know, because I'm kind of in my own world right now, doing my own thing, and then having this interaction with everybody else, which wasn't necessarily possible 6 months ago.
That's the fun of being creative, isn't it? You never know. I love that phrase. Yeah, you never know. You don't know if your seeds are going to land on healthy soil or where they're going to go. They may be blown away by the wind. But that's the integrity of it. You do it anyway. It's what Meister Eckhart said. Work for the sake of working. Do justice for the sake of doing justice, not for a reward. Not because you do know what the results are going to be. And I think that's just real sound spiritual advice. You get it from Buddhism as well, that we work to work. You do justice to do justice. You make beauty to make beauty. And then the seeds fall where they may. And I think Jesus had the very same experience. That's why he talked about it. Some seeds fall on fertile ground, and some fall on rocks, and some get blown away. But you do it anyway because you have this call, and that's integrity, following the call and doing your best. And look what you've gathered in this circle that you call a pilgrimage. It's just wonderful that so many people are being touched by Hildegard's genius in our time, because she is such a voice for our time.
So one of the questions that was asked to me by one of the pilgrims was, you know, we're focused right now on Hildegard from the Rhineland, and there are other mystics who came out of the Rhineland, and I know you've done other books on them and you've studied them. So I think the question was, why? You know, why was that happening at that time for those people? And then my question to that would be, where's that happening now in the world?
Well, I'll always maintain that the most important influence on the Rhineland mystics is the Celtic tradition. The Celts settled along the Rhine. They settled in northern Italy, so they gave us St. Francis. They even settled in northern Spain and gave us St. Dominic. We know that because Dominic was had red hair and a red beard. And so he was part Celtic. So I think we owe a lot of this to the Celts. And the Celts, remember, did not get their theology from St. Augustine, who was the champion of dualism and guilt-ridden for his sexuality as a young man that he never got over. He dumped on the rest of us. The church has absorbed it, unfortunately, for 16 centuries. But the Celts did not go south for their theology. They went to the east. And the East never lost the sense of the cosmic Christ. There is no cosmic Christ in Augustine. He's a psychologist. And he's a genius in his own field, if you will, in his own right, but he leaves out the cosmos. Creation is not important to the dualistic fundamentalists. And of course, Augustine has one great Catholic historian said, a lightning rod for right-wing movements for 1600 years. And that is because fundamentalism is based on dualism, and it's based on fear of the feminine and the yearning to control the feminine. And but the Celtic tradition, of course, it was nature-based before Christianity came, but it kept its nature basis and the sense of the cosmic Christ. Never lost it, really, although when the Southern Church, if you will, invaded Council of Whitby and all that in England, it was, they tried to control it. But, and of course they succeeded. And then Jansenism in the 17th century really cemented a new dualism in the Irish consciousness. But the point is that's what Meister Eckhart, Hildegard of Bingen, Francis of Assisi, Thomas Aquinas, Albert the Great, who all studied along the Rhine and Cologne and so forth. This is what they have in common. I think that Celtic basis, and of course the Celts are related to Hinduism, to India. And so many of the themes you find in Hildegard and Eckhart, for example, about birthing. Birthing is so important to Eckhart. Eckhart says, what does God do all day long? God lies in a maternity bed giving birth. Well, that's something, isn't it? That the universe is a manger. And of course, this is today's science. We now know that there's a new star being born every 15 seconds. How different this is from modern history and science that taught us that the universe is a machine. And so we shut it down. And so we lost Father Sky as an archetype. And men went crazy. And they're still crazy. And because they no longer could connect to something vast and sacred like the sky. And of course, so the point is that that many of these great themes we find in Eckhart, for example, and Hildegard too, are derived actually from the Hindu tradition, which is very strong in the themes of birthing, very strong in the themes of art as meditation and creativity. And the great Hindu scholar, Coomaraswamy, through whom I met Meister Eckhart. I didn't get Meister Eckhart from any Dominican teaching. I never heard his name once in 14 years of being trained as a Dominican. Of course, he was condemned. But Coomaraswamy says reading Eckhart is like reading the Upanishads. There are whole sentences in Eckhart, he says, that feel like they were translated from Sanskrit. And it's like reading the Upanishads. Now, Coomaraswamy, by the way, knew 35 languages. And but he recognized an Eckhart like that. In his important book written in the 30s on nature and art, he has a whole chapter on Eckhart and says these things. It's just amazing. So what's this Coomaraswamy, this Hindu, why is he all excited about a Rhineland mystic? Well, because Eckhart ingested the truth of the Holy Spirit, a whole theology of the Holy Spirit as co-creating with us in everything we do. So that's where it comes from. Now, I got into Eckhart, again, not through academia. When I was in Paris studying for my doctorate, the professor, who I loved a lot, history of spirituality, he only spoke briefly about Eckhart, and what he said was strange. He said, Eckhart only has a via negativa. Well, it's true that Eckhart's via negativa is as rich as you can get, the epiphatic divinity. But when I started, when I got into Eckhart, is because I read Coomaraswamy. And I had whole sentences from Eckhart in Coomaraswamy's book. I had just written in an article I'd written on sacred space and sacred time, and I couldn't believe it. What's this guy, this Dominican, this ex-Dominican, this, and I are saying the same words? And so that's when I discovered Eckhart. Then I had a car accident. I had an operation, and Eckhart came to me during my operation when I was unconscious. And we were walking together on the beach without saying a word. And it was the most transcendent experience of my life. And I knew that Eckhart and I had a destiny. And that's when I really threw myself into him and was thrilled, because I was writing a book on compassion, and I was getting very depressed that so few Christian theologians through the centuries had written about compassion. They wrote all these books about contemplation, climbing up contemplation, climbing up contemplation. And I found so little on compassion. And then I found Eckhart. He wrote a whole long exegesis of Luke 6, be you compassionate as your God in heaven is compassionate, and a whole treatise on the Our Father, which is all about compassion and justice, and all these other sermons on compassion. So that's a little of my story about how I found the Rhineland mystics. And it's Eckhart who led me to Hildegard. It was Eckhart who led me to Hildegard. I kept saying to myself, reading Eckhart, there's a woman in here someplace. There's this feminine energy. Where is this coming from? I knew that Eckhart was indebted to Aquinas, who was alive when Eckhart was alive. He died when Eckhart was about 15. But then I got to Hildegard, and I was thrilled. And the first person, I couldn't find anyone who knew anything about Hildegard. The first person was Tom Berry. The very first time I met him, we went walking together, and I mentioned, I'm working on a book on Hildegard's Illuminations. Oh, he said, and then went on and on about Hildegard. He's the only one on the earth that I had met who knew Hildegard and loved her as much as I did. So that was my opening to my pilgrimage with Hildegard, which has been going on for about 45 years.
So just thinking about the idea that there was this energy that connected these people from the Celts, and I'm thinking about back right now in our country, in our world currently, do you know, and because of what you're doing, can you share with us some other people that are really doing some good work right now?
Well, absolutely. I want to make a special connection to Hildegard and the Rhineland mystics, the creation mystics, to the Native American tradition. Because the very first time I translated Hildegard for class, the very time I shared her with a group in class, I read this poem of hers. I'm the one whose praise echoes on high. I adorn all the earth. I am the breeze that nurtures all things green. I encourage blossoms to flourish with ripening fruits. I'm led by the Spirit to feed the purest streams. I am the rain coming from the dew that causes the grasses to laugh with the joy of life. I call forth tears, the aroma of holy work. I am the yearning for good. I'll never forget what happened. I read that first time ever that I lectured on Hildegard, and a man spoke up. He said, I've been living on an Indian reservation for 15 years. I'm 26 years old. That lady you just quoted sounds exactly like the medicine man on the res who was my spiritual director the last 10 years. It blew my mind. I said, what? Hildegard, a 12th century German, a Benedictine, sounds like a late 20th century Native American healer? And it just blew my mind wide open. And of course, it's a question I've been carrying then for 45 years. And of course, it's obvious. Pre-modern consciousness of Hildegard, Frances, Aquinas, MPhil, Eckhart, and Julian Norwich has a lot more in common with Native American wisdom than it does with today's theology, Cardinal Ratzinger, or anyone else. Although Pope Francis is trying to get back to it. Because it begins not with the human. That is so modern, to begin with the human, which is to say, to begin with sin. It begins with cosmology, with the universe. Aquinas said, and I quote, the most excellent thing in the universe is not the human, it's the universe. And we're all here to serve that. All beings are. Well, that's Hildegard too. But that's Native American, that's indigenous around the world. So that's my number one answer to you. You want wisdom, go to indigenous peoples. And it's been my blessing and gift to be able to pray in many of their prayers and so on, because Native people have come to me to teach, because to my programs, because they find a home in creation spirituality that they don't find elsewhere. So the practices they have, the sweat lodges and the sun dances and the vision quest and all this, you don't want to appropriate it, but if you're invited, or even if you're eager, go out and knock on someone's door and try to get invited, but respect the fact that it is their lineage. But I've been so blessed by that, and that's that's my first answer to you. The wisdom that indigenous people carry. Now, it's not about romanticism. It's not about how things were perfect 500 years ago, but it is about the shadow that's missing in Western thinking, not just theology, but definitely theology, but education, as I talked about earlier. The whole thing leaves out the cosmos, therefore it leaves out the earth. As Thomas Berry says, ecology is functional cosmology. So if you don't have a cosmology, you don't have an ecology. If you don't have an ecology, the whole earth is going to be burning. And the flooding is coming too. As I was with 150 scientists 2 summers ago for a week on climate change, and they said the hot places are going to get hotter, the dry places are going to get drier, and the wet places are going to get wetter. And that's exactly what's happening. And this is a path we're on. So we need a whole new way of seeing the world, and that is a pre-modern way of putting the cosmos first, putting Mother Earth first. And then how do we fit with all of the other amazing species in what Hildegard marvelously called this web of creation, this web of creation, this sacred web of creation. And believe me, now that we have not had a blue sky for 3 weeks here, we're beginning to fulfill words I spoke years ago. We can no longer take healthy air for granted, healthy water for granted, healthy soil for granted, or the health of other animals and birds for granted, or even the health of our children and grandchildren for granted. But to me, that is what mysticism is, not taking for granted. It's falling into profound gratitude. And the gratitude born of awe and wonder and beauty and the doxa, the glory of creation, the cosmic Christ that is present in all of creation, just what Hildegard talks about, the wisdom of the sparkling of the waters, as she says. This is the Christ. Or if you prefer language like the Buddha nature, that's okay too. Or in Judaism, the image of God. Absolutely parallel understandings of the sacredness built in to all nature, including ourselves.
That's great. So I have one more question to ask you, but I'm also going to put this out to our pilgrims. If you have a question you would like to ask, just go ahead and send that as a chat message to Heather, or you could do it to the group so everybody can see the same question. That might be a better way to do that, and then she'll moderate that back to me, and then we'll ask that as the final question. But I have one more question to ask you, Matthew. And if you recall, I remember in 2013, we had a new Pope, and the question I asked you, what would Hildegard say to that new Pope? Well, I'm not going to ask you that same question, but in the same vein, what would you say to the current president or the next president? Or what would Hildegard say to the next president or the current president?
Well, I think Hildegard would say what she said to the emperor in her day, and that is to man up and put justice before your own greed and your own agenda. She kept calling popes and emperors back to justice, Lady Justice. I also would invoke, of course, I've just finished a book on Julian of Norwich, and I'm just stunned by her, stunned, because she lived through a pandemic, the worst pandemic ever in Europe, the bubonic plague. It was 7 when she hit, and then it kept returning in waves. And she is a direct descendant of Hildegard. That's why I call Hildegard the grandmother of the Rhine monastic movement. And Julian is in many ways, well, followed by Nicholas of Cusa, kind of the end of the line. But the unique thing about Julian is she was the only one of these 7 giants who had to live through a pandemic and stay true to creation spirituality. And that's why she's so amazing. I think, and Hildegard, or Julian, more than Hildegard even, although Hildegard began it, develops the theme of God as mother. She brings in, she deconstructs entirely patriarchy, and she brings in the divine feminine in all her angles on divinity. Christ is mother for her. She develops that. God the Creator is mother as well as father, she says. Spirit is mother, and the whole Trinity together is mother for her. So it's everywhere in her thinking. And non-dualism, she talks so much about sensuality and spirituality, sensuality and substance, and about God in nature, and God is nature, she says. So all this is you see, Hildegard is not standalone. She is a lineage, part of a lineage, but she's this great champion at the launching of the great 12th century Renaissance. But of course, this lineage goes back to Benedict, but also to Jesus. All scholars agree today that Jesus was from the wisdom tradition. And it's in the book of Wisdom that it says, and I quote, wisdom is the mother of all goodness. And that really is a metaphysics of Julian of Norwich, who talks about God as the goodness in all things. So this is what we have to get our presidents back to, and our popes and everyone. And Pope Francis in his Laudate Si encyclical does a good job of this. And this is what I mean by original blessing, for which I was condemned by 2 corrupt popes, utterly corrupt. The facts are coming out. But the truth is that original blessing is precisely that. The first page of Genesis, it was a blessing. You know, the first page of the Bible is all about cosmology. But how many schools or seminaries, schools of theology, are studying cosmology today? So this is how the Bible begins, that cosmology, all these things happening, light is first and all that, and it's all good, and then humans come in, and we're very good. Everything together is very good. And Hildegard uses the term original wisdom, and Aquinas uses the term original goodness. I use the term original blessing and got expelled from the Dominican order after 34 years for doing that, etc. So that just shows the intellectual corruption of our time. And of course, those 2 popes for 34 years killed theology in the West. And that's just not my idea. I ran into a professor from my alma mater, the Institut Catholique, years ago when I was doing a dialogue with the scientist Rupert Sheldrake. And she said, this could never happen in Europe today because these popes have killed theology in Europe. So, you know, that's where we're at. But when theology dies, well, spirituality can rise. And I think that's what you're doing, Michael, and I think what these pilgrimages is about, and this is a great interest in spirituality today, including ecumenism, the wisdom of the East meeting the wisdom of the West. And so that's why there are so many sources like Thich Nhat Hanh and the Dalai Lama and great wisdom from the East that is emerging today, and science itself. As I say, there are a lot more scientists today who are mystics than bishops. And I especially appreciate Rupert Sheldrake's work. I mean, there are many scientists, but he has 2 recent books on spiritual practices and science, how science supports meditation and chanting and art and pilgrimages and other practices. I recommend his work very strongly. He and I have done 2 books together, one on angels and one on nature and spirit. But the point is that there are many places to look today, and especially with the help of Google and the rest, where we don't even have to trip off to libraries. So there's a lot of potential, but time is running out on our species. And so your question is so important. I would end with this about your question. Aquinas says, a politician must know more about the human soul than a doctor knows about the human body. I just find that stunning, absolutely stunning. Hitler knew a lot about the German soul of the 1930s. He knew it was beaten down and wounded and full of resentment, and he tapped into that. I think that the current person in the White House has a similar charism, if you want to call it that. I think that he too has tapped into a big corner in a lot of the American souls after the Great Recession. The people you might say at Main Street who helped bail out Wall Street. Wall Street, of course, is now flourishing again. And Main Street is in many respects still deeply, deeply wounded. So he's tapped into resentment. Now, to me, those are two politicians that are very negative. But Aquinas' principle applies to them. Now, I think if we talk about a great president, like say Abraham Lincoln, or maybe FDR, or maybe you felt that way about JFK, these people tapped into the human soul of America and called forth a greatness, called forth a generosity and a commitment to justice, or keeping the Union together and so forth, and taking on slavery. So I think that's at the heart of things. But if you have a leader who only goes for the darkness and the shadow in the human soul, you're in a very precarious situation, which is what we're in today, of course. So that's kind of a bottom line for me when it comes to politicians that and leaders, that they need an inner life too. And again, hail to Hildegard, who dared to attack the emperor, whom she had met actually, and the Pope, and tell the Pope, you're surrounded by wicked people and evil is taking over your papacy, do something. And she always returns to the topic of justice. So that's the bottom line. And Aquinas, tremendous, he actually invented the term common good. He brought the term common good from Aristotle 1,500 years earlier into the mainstream of legal thinking in the West. And for that alone, and of course you talk about common good and law, that law is not law if it doesn't serve the common good, and common good and justice. Justice is a test of common good. So he has an incredible, profound understanding of politics and spirituality, like few other people ever. And but he's not been given credit for that because, to be honest, most Thomists have gone off into rabbit holes of scholastic questions that have nothing to do with the lives we live. But Aquinas was amazing, and his emphasis on conscience and consciousness. So all these mystics that I think Hildegard inspired. And Aquinas uses the word veritas, and he actually footnotes Hildegard on a few occasions, not real often. But there's no question that he knew about Hildegard, and he did make touch with some of her teachings. But she was part of a zeitgeist, a spirit that arose in the 12th century that was the return of the goddess. It was the return of the divine feminine. It gave birth to the whole Gothic movement, which of course was late in her life, but was birthed in her lifetime, such as Chartres Cathedral, and which was a reinvention of everything from education to politics to architecture. And so really her timing was so synchronistic to what was happening. And remember, she called Christ the Green Man. And the Green Man came in on the coattails of the divine feminine, of the goddess in the 12th century. So the Green Man was this amazing architect. At Chartres Cathedral, there are, I think, 165 images of the divine feminine, but there are 42 images of the Green Man. So it's about a 4-to-1 ratio there. But the Green Man was very significant in Hildegard's day. And she applied it directly to Christ. Christ is a green man, she said. And the green man, of course, represents the fertility of all of us, including the male, but also the defense of Mother Earth, that the green man is a warrior defending Mother Earth, and the green woman too. 10% of green men were women. At Norwich Cathedral, in fact, that's where you see a lot of green women on the cathedral there. So these archetypes do not apply to gender explicitly. They just apply to all of us. There's a goddess in every man, and there's a green man in every woman.
I love that.
Like there should be.
That's really nice. Nice way to think about that. I hadn't really thought that way. So let's go and see if there was any question that Heather's picked from our pilgrims. Heather, I don't know if you want to go ahead and ask the question, because you're right behind me in the room. Are you writing it down? You have to probably speak up here.
A few people have mentioned it.
No, go ahead and just ask the question.
We have a few people that have mentioned a specific book. A Native American woman had wrote it, Braiding Sweetgrass. It's Robin Kimmerer. Have you heard of her?
Oh yes, I have the book right here. Mm-hmm.
Excellent. Well, a few people have mentioned that what you're talking really relates to her writings as well. She may be sort of a modern equivalent.
Mm-hmm. Yes, yeah, I think you know, the indigenous voice is stepping up right now. Just women are finding their voices, their fifth chakra. So are indigenous people today, and of course, so are Black people. So a lot of groups that have been sat on, literally, and worse, for centuries, are coming back with their wisdom. And again, a lot of this wisdom, I think, fills the gaps. It represents a shadow that was put down. So again, this is what I love about Julian Norwitz, that she develops a whole alternative to patriarchy. And of course, the indigenous view of the world is an alternative to patriarchy, because it is an honoring of Mother Earth and the mother dynamics between different species and within the species. So again, it's about a balance. We need a healthy masculine, but we also need the presence of the divine feminine. And you know, I think it's coming through in many women's writings and in many indigenous sharings today. And this is a sign of hope in our time. The problem being that time is running out, and so much of the decision-making control is still in the grip of forces that have been seduced by patriarchy and the dualism that is behind patriarchy. And so this is why someone like Julian especially, but Hildegard too, but I mean, Julian is kind of a culmination of this journey of the creation mystics, that she really gets down to the basics. If we feel there's a war between body and soul, matter and spirit, well, we're not going to solve the problem. And of course, Augustine literally said that. He said the body makes war with the soul. Whereas Eckhart said the body loves the soul. Those aren't the same thing. And Julian carries Eckhart even further and talks about God sits in our sensuality. God loves our sensuality, etc. Now, she was not published for 300 years. And then when she was, it was just a long way to wait, by the way, for your first book review. And then when she was published, hardly anyone read her. But now we're ready for her because she's feminist. She was feminist 700 years before we had the word. And because she offers really a whole picture of what a healthy view of the world is, that does not engage in matricide, because that is what's going on right outside my door here with this discoloring of the sky and everything else. It's matricide. It's a killing of the mother. I had a dream 30 years ago, that birthed my Cosmic Christ book. And the dream said to me, your mother is dying. And I thought about that dream. And I said, my mother wasn't dying. She was alive and healthy. Oh, Mother Earth is dying. Mother Church is dying. The mother principle is dying. Compassion is dying. Creativity is dying. The feminine is no longer present in education. Wisdom is dying. Knowledge is everything. Yes, the mother is dying. But now this has come to a culmination that we have a word for today, climate change. or as these young people are calling it, extinction rebellion, to rebel against our own extinction and that of so many other species. So yes, we need all the wisdom we can gather, and the indigenous voices have so much to give. Women voices have so much to give. The mystics, West and East, have so much to give. And men who've done their inner work have plenty to give, because Eckhart was a feminist. And Aquinas was, I call him a proto-feminist, because his whole battle, his whole life was about dualism. He rejected consciously the dualism of Augustine and Plato and chose Aristotle, and he said why? Because Aristotle does not denigrate matter. And he was plummeted for this, pummeled for this. When he died, he was condemned 3 times because of his non-dualism, because of his, quote, consubstantiality of body and soul, the equality of spirit and matter. So he is a real proto-feminist. He's not been given credit for that. But these people stand on his shoulders. There would be no Eckhart without Aquinas. So all this is wonderful resources for our struggle today. It's an inner struggle. We have to do our inner work as well as our outer work. And that means reinventing all our professions, from education to politics to economics to religion to media. This is the task, but we're up for it in the sense that our species must be capable. We wouldn't have come this far, but we've got work to do. And that's where I love David Orr's definition of hope. The eco-philosopher says, hope is a verb with the sleeves rolled up. Hope is a verb with the sleeves rolled up. If we're willing to do the work, the inner work, and the putting it into the outer world, the outer work, like Hildegard did, someone alluded to that in today's presentations. She wasn't just a mystic in the closet. She was a mystic, you might say, in the world in every way. That's how we all have to be today.
So Matthew, as we wrap up receiving all of your wisdom that you've shared with us, which is so amazing that you're able to maintain all that and just keep putting it out there. I was wondering if you could share a prayer with us to close out this last part of the day, the last hour with you before we move on and do our breakout rooms, because I know a lot of people have a lot of things to say among themselves. But if there was a prayer or something that you could leave us with to reflect upon as we go into those breakout rooms,
sure.
I think we would appreciate that.
Okay, I'll be glad to. I have a little relics that someone sent me when I was writing one of my books on Hildegard. They told me it was from one of her places or something. I don't know. I hope it wasn't stolen or anything, but I like to believe that it's authentic or in some way. But anyway, I use this as a paperweight. She's with me often. So Sister Hildegard, our sister to Mother Earth, sister to women everywhere, sister to men, awaken us from our deceitfulness, from our self-pity, from our ignorance, from our narcissism as a species. Awaken us from this deadening that modern consciousness has locked us into. Awaken us to a vigor for justice, for eco-justice, for gender justice, for racial justice, for justice with all the other animals and critters that we share the planet with, the rivers and the oceans, the trees and the soil, clouds, the air. Maybe reinvent the way we live on this planet, our species, so that it might flourish, that it might be green, full of viriditas, full of the Holy Spirit. Be with us, Hildegard. We need your strength and your wisdom and your passion. Amen.
Just wanted to sit with that for a moment for all of us.
Wow.
Yeah. Amazing.
There's so much to unpack from this.
Exactly. Well, firstly, thank you, EJ, for getting this on so smoothly, and also to Frances for alerting us to this video, giving us this video. And perhaps I should just mention that, Frances, you went on that online pilgrimage.
I did.
And when we were talking about this Mystic Matters meeting, we thought, my goodness, there's so much. And this was before we watched the video. So now, as you say, EJ, there's so much to unpack. So we were thinking that perhaps at a later stage, probably early next year, we'd have some more follow-up. Maybe we've got some more of that material that Frances still has, if that's possible. There is so much to unpack. So that would be lovely if we could follow up with that. And just before I open up now for discussion, I thought I might just mention, in 1995, we invited Matthew Fox to come to UNISA for our very first spirituality conference. We didn't have spirituality as an academic discipline then, but there were a lot of people who were interested. And on a telephone call, he said he would love to come, but the very day we would like him to be with us in South Africa, he was being ordained an Episcopal priest, because, you know, the Dominicans had sent him packing. I don't know the expression he used in the video. And as I was listening to him telling us about his story there, I thought, thank goodness the Dominicans sent you packing, because now we have such a wonderful person to refer to openly without any constrictions of, you know, hierarchy and so on. So he came, he didn't come, but we just got to know him in passing. And one of the students at UNISA was from a very Calvinist background, I think Dutch Reformed background. And he said that his book, Original Blessing, totally changed his whole life and his whole approach to Christianity. So it's just one thing that's remained with me all these years. And so thank you so much, Frances. Firstly, thank you that you've completed your research on Hildegard, and I'm sure you're going to be continuing delving into her work. So I'd like to just now offer it over to further discussion, and Frances will be with us. EJ, is there anything else you wanted to add before we go into discussion?
Yeah, you know, just a funny story of how I came to know about Matthew Fox, and that was in my young days when I was still clubbing, and I loved trance music, and I heard about the cosmic masses that he was involved in, and it's a whole different approach to doing, you know, the Eucharist and Mass, which, you know, spurred my interest in his work. And so I have Original Blessing, and about 2 weeks ago I got his book on the Cosmic Christ. So just a little bit of a story.
Wonderful, thank you. So we definitely need to have a follow-up. This time is too short. It's just an introduction. So thanks for that. Okay, should we just open up? There were some questions on chat, which I think have been answered during the course of the discussion. Thank you to various people, Tim and others, Timothy and others. But if you want to now speak more directly, especially to Frances, should we just start with the discussion?
I see there was a question about the significance of Hildegard's music. Maybe, Frances, if you don't mind, if you could tell us more about that.
Okay, so, well, Hildegard, and here's a picture of her, writing her and where she lived. Just to give you an idea, I don't know how much you can see.
Yes, thank you.
Well, she, you know, she was a polymorph, so she did a lot of things. So I didn't do any research on her music as such. I focused on creation in order to keep it focused. But her music, she wrote her own music, composed it for the monastery, for the women that she lived with, for their prayers, for their liturgy. So, unfortunately, her works have been preserved, so we have the music. And then some scholars have, Barbara Newman, who's like a big scholar, academic scholar on Hildegard, has translated Hildegard's book called Symphonia, so which is about her music and has her musical text. And of course, there are various websites. And of course, there are a lot of CDs, and there's some on YouTube that you can actually listen to. So her music was for like liturgical, chanting psalms and that sort of thing. And that was because the Benedictine monasteries, I mean, that was their life, it's the liturgy. They pray about 6 times a day. I shouldn't laugh, but you know, us modernists, we don't have all that time. But they were contemplative. So in the 12th century, can you all hear me? Are you okay? So in the 12th century, that was their life, their liturgy, mass, and their work. You know, in the Rhineland, of course, that's where the creation comes in. It was brought up in the beautiful surroundings, vineyards, and, you know, sorry, you didn't see the picture much, but it shows the area where she is and where the abbey is. And then you see, as Matthew said, she came from the Celts, she settled in the Rhineland. And that's where she's got that greenness and the lushness and the rain and the grass. You could too with here, anyway. So I don't know, that doesn't really answer the question. I couldn't go into the music as such. And there's some of the short music about Mary and that, and Jesus as the green branch and Mary as sort of in the greenness, which are very beautiful. They're like poems, but they're also her songs. The green finger of God, I think, is one. And in my research, I do mention it, but obviously it wasn't the topic of the research. And people, a lot of, I've found in my research, academics or music, people into music, have written papers on Hildegard. So a lot of the scholarly articles are musical, are about her music, more so maybe than the other topics. So I don't know if that answers anything.
I was just wondering, thank you so much for that. Just wondering, in your retreat, the online retreat, which we hope to share with you again later at another time, did they include Hildegard's music as part of that journey?
I'm not sure now. They had like 10 stages, which is the actual pilgrimage in the area in Bingen, or not just Bingen, in the area where she was. That whole, there was certain like little villages, Rotesheim, and her birthplace. It was more traveling through her life, and they've got like stations, and they talk about her. To be honest, Celia, I don't know if music really came up that much.
Yes, thank you. It's something we could think about for having some background music ourselves. I think we've got a lot to learn and a long way to go, so we've got opportunities.
Oh, bye.
Yes, I know. Thanks for sharing that.
And some people don't like that. Ooh, up there, people that are plain chant.
Yes.
Although it's specific to her, it's not she kind of developed her own chant. And then, of course, there are a lot of short videos on YouTube. And there's a lady, I forget her name, she's an unusual name, but she actually, and the people dance, and they actually play the instruments that she used. You know, they've redeveloped them. And they do these little, it's very interesting, it's beautiful, really.
Wonderful, thank you.
There's a lot of sources. I mean, I'm also, and the sources are for every day. You know what I mean? For, as Matthew says, we must be creative and nourish our spirit. It's not all academic in the head. Knowledge.
Yeah, thank you. And thanks, EJC. We now have a link to a movie on the chat site here, a movie called Vision.
That's right.
Have you seen that? Has anyone seen
it?
Okay.
And then the gentleman, Michael Conti, he has got a movie, The Unruly Mystic, Hildegard of Bingen. He's got somebody else as the Unruly Mystic, but Hildegard of Bingen, The Unruly Mystic. No, I haven't seen that.
Oh, lovely.
There is there's trailers for all these movies on YouTube. It must just, to get a taste of there's a lot on YouTube. That's how I sort of, not for my research, but to kind of get a picture of what, to learn a bit about it. Yeah.
Yes. Oh,
I mean, there's scholarly talks on YouTube. Bernard McGinn, and he says she's not a mystic. Now, this is Bernard McGinn. She's not a mystic. She's a visionary, prophetic visionary. So she's not a mystic this was him, and also I think our supervisor said that too. A lot of people call her a mystic, even scholars in that.
Mm-hmm.
That because the mysticism, as you know, Celia, without getting too academic here, is an individual kind of like Julian with God, their own spirit, their own, where she prophesied. She had all these visions, she wrote about them, and then she spoke about them. That was her spirituality. So, again, calls her Bernard, calls her prophetic visionary, like St. Paul. He compares, there's so much, I can't go on about Hildegard and scripture, and he compares it to St. Paul in the scriptures. And
yes.
go on all day, yeah.
Yes, wonderful. No, it's a life's journey. Thank you so much. Are there other questions from the rest of the group here? Other discussions or questions? Mary?
I think I was really impressed by, I hadn't ever heard him speak before, and I was very, he's very erudite, isn't he? I was struck, because I've always been interested in the Celtic spirituality as well, and, linking her with that. And I belong to a group here where we're looking at Julian of Norwich, and so it all sort of ties in. And I think in my own mind, I've always thought the approach was an emphasis on the human. So I was quite struck when he said, no, it's an emphasis on the whole cosmos. And I found that really useful in terms of placing it, because, you always think of, being non-dualistic can almost lead you into a sort of humanistic or pantheistic approach. So I found it, I think that struck me. I found that helpful, and it, so that was good. So I'm sorry I've disappeared from the screen, but there we are.
Yeah. Thanks, Mary. It's good to hear your voice.
Yeah, nice to be here.
It was interesting how he linked up, in his talk with Julian of Norwich. That talk, as EJ said, it could take a lot of unpacking. There was so much, and he went quite quickly from different aspects, so there was a lot to cover. But thanks, Mary, that was good. Anybody else would like to add anything? We've still got time, EJ, have we?
I was quite interested in his link to creation spirituality.
Yeah,
that was something that really stood out.
Yeah. That's her big thing. I mean, that was a huge thing in her. Sorry, excuse me, but
no, that's fine.
Oh, please tell us more. We're dying to hear more.
And we need more of more research, more researchers, and more research into Hildegard and Viriditas. Viriditas, he did mention Viriditas, but that's her concept. Everything is green. Even God is green. He said about the green man, and that's another one I didn't know about. Jesus, the green man, but God is green. The Trinity is green. That's why her drawings. I think I was supposed to use screen share to show a picture. Her mandalas. And also this non-dualism, because her mandalas are round, the cosmos. I don't know, can I show this? How would I do it?
Yes.
I've got one of his books here.
Yeah.
You see? I don't know, can you see it? No?
Yes.
This is Matthew's book, and actually I used a bit of this in the research, and I found this a lovely book, you know what I mean, in terms of anybody who wants to read, because there's a whole lot of his joins in the middle of it, and he's got like a chapter for each one with a title. Sorry. I mean, her writings are so complex, but you see, that's how she would depict the earth. Not a love. That's a sort of a wisdom way and all-inclusive. Would you think that? This one is called, oh gosh, I can't see it. All beings celebrate creation. Amazing. Can you see? Sorry.
Yes, no, it's wonderful. We can see. Thank you.
And then, what else have we got here? This is Matthew's book. Now you see, okay, human microcosm, cultivating the cosmic tree. That one.
Yes.
And this is the cosmic man.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But you see, he writes a chapter on what all of them mean. You know, it's quite complex, if you like, but I mean, Matthew breaks it down. And to me, he writes about Hildegard for the average person, which is what is so wonderful. You know, some of the translating her writings from Latin, I mean, he's done that. He had his book behind him. I mean, it's all like you have a headache trying to understand it all, but for our living spirit, you know, for everyday life and understanding creation. Matthew's the best. Now, this is the last one I'll show you. Egg of the universe and the cosmic wheel. Right. So this is the egg of the universe.
Oh, yeah.
And she explains what the egg, what each one is, and Matthew has a chapter there, and he explains the egg of the universe. And then what is this one? This is the cosmic. Then this is the cosmic wheel. This one.
Right.
Yeah, sorry, but it's, you know, people look on YouTube. You even get some little videos explaining all the, you know, to give you a taste. YouTube is fantastic.
It is. It is. It's, yeah. No, thank you so much, Frances. I'm tempted to say there's so much, in a way, you've introduced us to her creation spirituality with your masters. Yeah. But you know, there's a lot that could be taken further, maybe at some stage when you retire from all your work, do a PhD on Hildegard.
Yeah, well, it's going on here.
Okay.
You see, Celia, but maybe, I don't want to bore people. I did try, I really wanted to, Hildegard in the role of woman in the church. And I was, the whole thing of deaconesses was on the go. And Judy wrote that somehow, after writing, that's wasting 6 months on a proposal, pre-proposal, just to get it, you know. But, you know, I wasn't scholarly enough in that. So, you know, this master's, in a way, I also had to learn how to write, you know, a master's program. But definitely I had lots of things going on my head. You know, as I said, you could have written 3 doctorates for all the things I wanted to do.
Yes.
You know, connecting with Hildegard. So I had to narrow it, of course. Now I know how.
And also possibly write some papers. You know, have you seen the new magazine that's come out now in the Southern Cross? It's come out this month. It's a magazine instead of just the paper. I think the paper, the newspaper, I'm not sure whether that's continuing.
Yeah, unfortunately, we haven't been getting the Southern Cross for some reason or another. Yeah.
Well, they've got this new system now, so there's scope. Let's chat about it sometime.
Yeah, okay.
You know, it's lovely to share the, you know, the information that you have shared with us. So that's a possibility. Sorry, are there any other people who would like to either just comment or ask Sister Frances, but just comment maybe on what they found? So,
call me Frances.
Sorry?
Just call me Frances.
Frances, yes, we'll get you mixed up. Thank you.
Jimmy, where are you?
Well, there's a link. Tim is asking for a link.
Oh,
Is,
a link.
are you still with us, Timothy?
Yes, I'm still there. Yeah.
Oh, link us to your work. Oh, all right.
Yeah. If you wouldn't just mind pinging us a link to your masters or other writing, and yeah, it'd be great to pick that up and read it. Yeah.
All right. So would I email it or I don't know about it. How does that work? A link. I can email it to EJ or to Celia as a PDF or whichever way. The paper.
That'd be great. Thanks. Yeah.
Yeah, EJ, if we get the PDF, we could send it out.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll do that. What we'll do, Francis, is on the next notice, when we send out the notice for December, then we'll add the PDF. The reason I say that is that we don't want to overload people's e-boxes. And just some good news before I forget, for those who know Kumaran, he'll be with us from India. So he'll zoom in from India. I think it's the second Wednesday. We'll check that, EJ. I think it's the 8th or the 9th. And then he will be with us in December. So when we send out that notice, we'll add the PDF so that we can, go into it a bit more in detail. Thank you.
You're welcome. I'll send it to you.
Please
link the work on Hildegard.
Yeah. You remember the title now. Sorry, I'm teasing you. Other people, we've still got a little bit of time for discussion. I know that we'll be drawing it to a close soon. Anything else? I think there's so much. I mean, I have a feeling, EJ, I'm sure we could check this with you, that we'll be zooming in for another year or so. I can't see us having an in-person meeting for quite a while. So there's so many possibilities. And even when we do get back to our in-person gatherings, I think, how do you feel? How does everyone feel? The Zoom aspect is really very helpful. We can encompass a lot of stuff that we wouldn't do in our gathering at home. So anyway, keep it in mind, for next year.
And more people can attend on Zoom. I mean,
absolutely.
You couldn't fit 100 in your house.
So I didn't hear that.
I say you couldn't fit 100 in your house, but you could have 100.
No. Or wearing masks and so on.
Oh yes, and all that.
Jimmy, sorry to call you out, Jimmy, but any insights from your own research, but any insights on Hildegard in particular and Matthew Fox? I just found Matthew Fox so dynamic. I mean, he said, sorry, Jimmy, I was calling you out now. I'd love you to come back if you wouldn't mind. But, he said the Dominicans kicked him out like over 40 years ago. And, the fact that they tell somebody to go because he's got such insights, this idea of original blessing instead of original sin. I mean, it's a great privilege to have someone thinking like that. We should ask our Father Christoph what he thinks about this, because why not keep the people with you and let them share their thoughts? Why is the institution so scared to have new thought? But I'm jumping around a bit now. Christoph, do you feel like telling us why they should have kept him? I feel quite happy actually that he's with us without being kept. Sorry, carry on.
Sorry to interject there. I think, I remember a while back when Original Blessing about 25 years ago really made its rounds. I think we can easily forget that it's through the lens of people like Richard Foster and Dallas Willard and others that there's been a revival of spirituality, but it's been through the modernist lens. And in many ways, the view that people like Matthew Fox and others have brought really challenges Christianity on two levels. The one is on the notion of original sin and therewith the necessity and sufficiency of the church. And the downside to that is that Christianity has a long-standing dysfunctional relationship to experience, and especially the experience of God. And so the notion of hierarchy that was inherited with the medieval period, and that really meant that God spoke to the few and the few spoke to the many. And the few that God spoke to were those that ruled society and ruled the church and ruled via its structures. And so in many ways, the notion both of original blessing and personal experience thoroughly challenges that institutional paradigm that is really Christendom in translation. And that's, as I see it, Christendom in translation for the modern world, which is Catholicism and Protestantism. And so in some ways, the paradigms and the challenges around the politicization of faith, and rather than around the theology itself, because the theology, as Fox and others so rightly point out, is actually inherent in the faith. It's just been covered up so systematically over the years. At least that's my perspective. But I certainly loved being exposed to Matthew Fox and the vision that came with it, and it transformed my spirituality.
Well, thank you, Timothy. Thank you very much. And Jimmy, do you want to come in on that?
Since you did ask me, I now feel obligated. So if I can add to what Timothy has correctly pointed out. So Matthew Fox is an absolute pioneer, and I think he will be remembered for a long time. Perhaps if he was a Dominican today, things might be slightly different, because the Dominicans themselves are in the process of restoring Meister Eckhart on the grounds that he himself was not condemned, but some of his writings were found to be suspect, and then he died before he had an opportunity to defend himself. So there is a whole movement within the Catholic Dominican tradition to restore Meister Eckhart. But just to speak more broadly about Matthew Fox himself, I really want to highly recommend everything that Matthew Fox has written or created. He hasn't just written on Meister Eckhart and Hildegard of Bingen, but also on MPhil of Magdeburg, and the whole notion of creation spirituality is not one that he uniquely identifies with Hildegard, but in fact, it's a category of a biblical genre. So this is the point really to take home. Creation spirituality is a biblical doctrine, which is associated primarily with the wisdom literature and the poets of the Old Testament and some of the New Testament. But it is countered to the emphasis on sin, salvation, and retribution that we also find in the Bible. And so creation spirituality is the name that Matthew Fox gives to a spirituality that is cosmological, that is creation-centered, that is earth and woman and mother friendly. And he locates mystics such as Meister Eckhart, Hildegard of Bingen, MPhil of Magdeburg, and many others in the creation spirituality view. So anything that you can find by Matthew Fox, I would highly recommend.
Thank you.
Maybe I can say a few words. I'm not an expert in Matthew Fox, but what I can understand from what Timothy and Amy have just said is that church politics, unfortunately, sometimes destroy good work by vanities and rivalries, all kind of petty dimensions of church people sometimes. We have seen it many times in church history, so it wouldn't be the first or the last time. I think we have to look at the bigger picture, as I think we all agree. The church is holy, but its members are sinners. So there's always that tension between the church in theory and the church in practice. So it's a cross, the mystery of the cross. We have to bear with it. I think also Matthew Fox is probably one of the great reconciler of the church and its historical roots. After all, the Orthodox theologians don't have much problem with cosmology, creation, theology. They are already advanced compared with Latin Christians because they didn't have this over-judiciary approach to theology. So pneumatology, the theology of the Holy Spirit has always been stronger among them. I think we can appreciate the work of Matthew Fox. He is probably a pioneer for reconciliation between the Orthodox, Catholics, and also modern secular approach to life. Without mentioning his love for Buddhism, Hinduism, all these spiritualities, they are rediscovered in the 20th century by the Christians because the church was stuck in power, in politics, and repressed mystical dimension of the lay people. I shared with Celia a few weeks ago a very interesting tape from a French lady of the 17th century, and the tape is about one of her many books called A Very Simple and Easy Way to Meditation. And it is really kind of mystical approach to prayer, but anybody can practice. Very close to what the Hindu or the Buddhist use, but unfortunately, she was taken into church politics, which were much worse than even the 20th century. So she has not been really appreciated by church authorities. So Matthew Fox, like Madame Guyon, is one of those many victims of church politics. Anyway, thank you for Celia and Eugene and Francis and all of you to share about it. For me as a priest, it's always painful to hear that a good man has been knocked down by church politics. But even Jesus himself, Messiah, has been crucified. So as disciples, do we expect better treatment? Thank you.
No, thank you so much. It's an ongoing process. And as you say, I think looking at Madame Guyon and others, and nowadays, things have changed. So we've got some things to be grateful for. But I think there are many people who are hesitant to put their views out into the church context, which is quite sad on the one hand. On the other hand, people like Matthew Fox has brought us great wisdom by doing so. And yeah, thank you so much, Christophe. That was helpful. Eugene, where are we now in terms of, I don't mean where are we now, I mean what time have we got?
Yeah, I think we can wrap up.
We can wrap up. Francis, is there any last word you'd like to leave us? Basically, remember, we really would like to, you need your unmute. Oh, yes.
Yeah.
we really would like to continue. So this is just a preliminary, but perhaps just to sum up for us before we say farewell for the time being.
Okay, I've sent you and EJ an email with the attachment of the research paper in case anybody didn't want to wait till December, so you can decide, or they could maybe contact you. Timothy, yes. I think, wanted it, yeah. I don't know how to wrap up. Or maybe we could maybe just have a short little moment of silence, just to ask Hildegard to intercede for us on behalf of us as a human race, us as a group, that we will appreciate ourselves. And this is in line with what Matthew was talking about. To love ourselves, to see that we are an original blessing, that the earth is our original home, our common home, as Pope Francis says. And in line with Hildegard, her drawings are a circle, and we're only in the middle. We're not at the pyramid. We're not dominating over the earth. So, Lord, like St. Francis, St. Hildegard, and all the saints who appreciate themselves, nature, and the world. And we give you thanks. And we say, glory to you, God eternal. Amen.
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 Thank you so much.